Okay, I am going to do a quick demonstration on trimming a bowl. First thing we need is a bowl that's thrown on the wheel that is leather hard. Remember, leather hard is that stage in between being wet and floppy and being bone dry. So the form is stiffened up, it's holding its shape, it's easy to handle, perfect consistency for trimming, but do handle carefully because it can still get dinged and warped. Okay, so first we're going to determine what needs to be trimmed off by running our finger down the wall and finding out where you feel like it starts to get a little bit thicker, so it changes the width, the consistency of the wall. So I'm going to just take my nail and I make a couple marks there so I know that that's where my wall starts to feel like it's getting a little bit thicker and I want to trim that off. Next thing I need to do is determine the placement of the foot. Remember, that's the transition point, somewhere where the wall and the floor transition. That's the most stable place, or structurally stable place, to put your foot. So you can go ahead and just measure that with your fingers, turn it over and make some marks to notate that. The other thing you can do is use calipers and do the same thing. Guesstimate about where you want your foot to be, turn your bowl over, and again make marks, make some marks with the calipers so that you can judge where your foot is going to be. And then we want to determine the depth of our foot. If you've been throwing a good bit, you know approximately how deep your piece goes before you hit the wheel head, so the depth of the floor. If you don't, however, you can take something flat, like your wood tool, and you can take a ruler and you can actually measure to see where things land. So that's 2.5 inches deep on the inside. On the outside, that's 3 inches deep. So I have a 1/2 inch floor, basically. Okay. Last thing I'm going to do is commit this interior shape to my memory because I'm trimming this pot upside down. I'm not going to be able to check it while I'm trimming. So I want to really think about the floor of the piece, whether it's conical, flat, or it has a graceful slope. So think about the way that looks, commit it to your memory, and then we're going to turn our bowl upside down on our wheel head. Get it centered. If your bowl is fairly centered to begin with, this shouldn't be too hard of a process. You can use your concentric rings on your wheel head. And then you're going to take your needle tool and you're going to slowly walk it in until it touches the bowl, and then stop walking it in, just hold steady. And what you're going to see is the needle tool is going to make a mark where the pot is close to you and it's touching, and it's not going to have a mark where it isn't close to you. So what I do is I find the ends of that mark, turn them away from me, and then the side that didn't get touched, I'm going to pull that closer to me. Okay, same thing, start the wheel up and pick another point and do the same process. Okay, lines basically going from here all the way around to here. Scoot this part towards me just a little bit and I should be ready to go then. Pick one more point. I do have, that looks like it's going all the way around. I do have one spot where there's a finger jab in there and it's not touching. It'll never touch. I'm going to take 3 pieces of clay, triangulate them, push down. Not necessarily into your bowl because that may crush the rim. Okay, then with the wheel moving slowly, I find where my nail marks were, and I'm just going to mark that off right away. Okay, so now I know that is where my foot is going to be. Next thing I'm going to do is work on this side. There's usually this crusty edge. I like to take the side of my tool and just trim down and get rid of that. Now remember, when you're trimming, you are a human lathe. You have to be as steady as possible. Don't let your tool ride on the surface, but put pressure pushing inward on your tool so that your tool is grabbing at the high spots, skimming over the low spots, and redefining the shape. If you just let your tool sit on the surface lazy, it's going to mimic whatever shape is there. So how I had all those crusty things in the beginning, it'll just echo that form. Okay, now I have a lot of material to take off at the top, so at the top I'm doing a lot of pressure. And as I work my way down the pot, I ease off. Now it might seem like I'm going kind of quickly. My wheel is moving at about a medium speed. And that's about where I'd like to be when I'm trimming. And you can see I'm getting nice ribbons of clay. If my clay is too wet to trim, it's going to ball up around my tool and just make things difficult. If it's too dry, instead of getting ribbons of clay, I'm going to get little chunks and dry shavings. Remember, we want to stay away from clay dust, so at all costs, if you can avoid trimming something that's too hard, avoid it. Just make a new one. All right, so there, I'm starting to define the shape of the bowl. If you need to, you can go up as well as down. You don't have to just go down. And you can see my line here. I'm getting really close to that. I just want to be careful that I don't remove too much clay away from there. But I do want to clean that up. And you can see I was going straight down. So I'm going down and trying to make that convex curve. Okay, now I'm going to work on the top of my piece. I'm going to level it off. So I hold my trim tool, I'm using the point of it, hold it at a slight angle, and I'm just removing a little bit of clay at this point because I want to level it off and make sure that if I cut it off crooked, that I'm not just repeating that crookedness, because then my bowl won't sit flat and straight on the table. So I just take a little bit off. And remember, it's one concentric ring after the other, so that basically it looks like a record. You can do that a second time if you feel like there were any little bobbles or any idiosyncratic things going on. Go over it one more time. Okay, that feels pretty good to me. Now I'm going to just work on this foot slightly. Clean that shape up. I want to round this corner. Now I can take my needle tool and put a line here, and I can then indent all of this, remove all of that from my pot. And then remember, when we're trimming, we're trying to make the outside shape match the inside. That goes with the bottom too. If your bottom is real flat, make sure that you're trimming it real flat. If your bottom is very concave on the inside, make sure that it's convex on the outside in this part. So I can go a little bit deeper here. You know, I'm a little bit deeper at this point than I am at the center here. And then I can just round that corner off. Remember to keep this rim consistent with the width of your walls. So I want to trim this down just a little bit, make it a little narrower, and round that off. If you were using grog, you may want to use the back of your wood tool to burnish the piece to get rid of any of those little grog lines that drag through the surface. You can do that. You can also use this to compress the foot of the piece, making for a nice smooth surface. If you don't like the trimming lines, at this point I use the large tool, and I use it to take thin shavings off and make that nice and cleaned up. So go ahead, take your pot off the wheel, lift it carefully, and check it. Ask yourself, you know, do the walls feel even? Do I need to remove a little bit more? Could I have taken more out of the bottom? If any of those things are the case, then you can always just put it back down on the wheel, recenter it, and start trimming again. If you're ready to go, put your name on the bottom. We'll let it dry on the shelf, and then it'll get bisque fired.